people have asked if they can have the presentations available, and most of you, if not all of you, have the Google Drive link to where we uploaded things. And there's some sensitivity around having PowerPoints versus PDFs. So I just want to ask you not to share the Google Drive link outside of this small group right now, because what we'll do is make PDFs of everyone's presentations after the workshop and upload those on a website where the whole world can get to them. And that way you can share them with colleagues. But this way, there's intellectual property in some of the PDF and some of the PowerPoints. And yes, people can take it and use it in a PowerPoint, but it's a lot harder if it's a PDF. So anyway, thank you for that understanding, and we'll make sure that everything is available as PDFs after the workshop.
Or to make this even more complicated, if you feel that some of the information in your PowerPoint/PDF is too sensitive that you don't want shared on the website, make sure that you give us the high sign and we'll get the edited version of your talk out into the world. So, you know, whichever, we're not trying to overshare, but we do want to share what we have there. We'll do this so that that link that you have to the Google Drive only went to the meeting participants. So you are the only ones who have that information at this point. That will never be publicly shared, just to make that entirely clear. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other issues with that?
No, that's it.
Okay. So thank you for participating in the gallery walk. There's a lot of Post-its out there. Thank you. It's more than I suspected, so that's fantastic. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to go through and read every single Post-it, but just a pulse back. I know that a few of you did mention, like, gosh, the principles actually aligned with a lot of stuff that we were talking about this morning. That's a good thing, right? And what we'll be doing is in breakout 5 tomorrow. I think that's how it works out. Was it 5, 4, 5? Yeah, we'll be visiting all this material again tomorrow afternoon, I think it is in the schedule, where we're going to be talking about key messages. So I think a lot of this will be revisited during that conversation as well. That's breakout 5.
There's one today.
Yeah.
Breakout 2. Developing key Arctic messages.
No, it's not 5. It's 2. It says in.
Whichever one says key messages.
It's today. It's today.
It's
this afternoon.
This afternoon, okay. Sorry.
Breakout group 2.
So we're going to revisit this. So hopefully, you know, we'll be slowly building and you know, through these conversations, learning about what everybody else says and what we already know, but then harvesting that information and trying to coalesce into these key messages that we want to be sharing, which of course will, you know, inform all this work that we are doing, and then we'll, you know, come back and inform the principals. So there are a couple questions. People, I'm sorry if I gave an impression that these are like locked down and not up for debate or discussion. That is not the case. The reason why I was sharing that, you know, these have been, you know, commented on by hundreds of people, I just didn't want you to think that I made this up in my hotel room last night. This has been, you know, shared, and that's why we want to present it to this illustrious group of scientists and educators, because we want your feedback. We want you to know that they exist, number one, and see if they're useful for you. And yes, okay, we're not going to agree on every single word because we are trying to thread that needle and make a lot of people happy at once. But we do want your comments. We do want your feedback on this. So please, I'm sorry if I gave that impression before, so I certainly didn't mean it. Janice, did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for their feedback. Obviously, there's more work to be done on the scope of it, the content, the process for how we move forward. And again, just to reiterate, this was based on the needs of the people involved in our polar ice project, and we're just happy to share that with you right now. I also want to say Jason and I are going to be in the lobby this evening. If anybody wants to meet for dinner and discuss this a little bit more of what the next steps might look like, if you're interested, we would love to discuss that with you. Did you want to add something?
I wanted to mention, because Janice shared these with us early, and we vetted them through some people at our center and gave some feedback. But one of the strengths I saw is any of us working with NGSS realize that polar doesn't play a prominent role there. So those of us that have been looking for those overarching ideas to lay our science around, and I always give ice cores in our facilities as an example. We have thousands of kids that come through our building every year with ice cores. But my goal is not to make them an ice core paleoclimatologist. It's to use that in service of teaching existing things, we're kind of left to do our own things and our own devices, and we don't necessarily know if we're hitting those 10,000-foot critical issues. And this I saw as a way to help us get there as a community, as opposed to everybody doing their one-off thing that doesn't connect to those overarching ideas. That's my 2 cents worth.
And we all know we can't trust you for your own devices. Jason's amazing. If you don't know him, definitely have dinner with him. You're gonna love him. What I'm going to do is, just to wrap up that part of this, what I'm going to do is make a Word document out of all these and put your stickies to the corresponding sub-principles, and I'll share that in the folder as well. So you'll all have a record of what happened, and we can use that to move things around. So those are the comments. What I want to hear is, we have a few minutes, just a few minutes. I want to hear back from you. Did you feel that that exercise was useful?
Yes.
Don't all shout at once.
I want to hear more about what other people, I feel like we'll get more about what other people, like I got more about what other people were putting down rather than me being able to share information for it.
Great. Honestly, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. Unfortunately, we had hoped to, as a group, walk through the different principles together, so you would all have a chance to share that. Unfortunately, we're going to run out of time to be able to do that. But we'll leave them up here so you can look at them during breaks and maybe ask some people what they're up to. And like I said, we'll share that Word document, and then whoever wants to volunteer and share would be great.
I thought there was an interesting discussion both about refining the language or
Yeah.
commenting on the language, as well as trying to then relate that to activities or learning experiences we could develop. So I think those are both really important things to do. So
Have to be done.
if we haven't really fleshed out the potential learning experiences or projects, then we should make sure that we have some opportunity to do that.
Great.
Why did you pick 7 principles?
Was there 7 ocean principles? There are other that have picked 7.
That's actually an interesting point to raise. So we've been through this in the COSI community. Those of you that are familiar with the Centers for Ocean Science Education Excellence, and now the nonprofit that Gail leads, we've been through this, getting scientists and educators to communicate about what's important, and it sort of came from that. Like, we need to do that again more specifically for this community. So hence the 7, sort of parallel.
7 digits and a telephone number was done by design, because that's what the human brain can manage. But it doesn't. If we don't want it to be 52, because that's just too many. Definitely less than 10. If you have an argument for less, absolutely have those conversations. We don't want to get too unwieldy, because honestly, with some people have a real passion for their particular science and their research, and when they were reviewing it, all of a sudden it was to 15 principles on their one science, and we get that. I mean, we all have our passion, so we're trying to again thread the needle on that one, but we're open to all those discussions. I'm sorry.
I'll just want to say that what we'll do with these, we are going to have a workshop report, and what we'll do with those big Post-its out there is synthesize where the clusters are, where the gaps are, and we'll share that with everybody.
We just sit on it.
So the clusters meaning what projects are able to take advantage of the different points, or because I guess I'm is that what the goal was?
So the goal is really to see where there are initiatives, resources, activities that are already addressing specific sub-principles, if you will, and then where may there be need for things to be developed. And that need may be debated. If there's a sub-principle that no one put a sticky on, or there's 1 or 2 stickies and everything else has a whole bunch, then maybe that's not important enough to have as a sub-principle. I don't know, if that's for them to decide to put before the community, but we wanted, this will help us to see what the reaction of you all has been to those. And again, where there are clusters of resources, and as an aside, I just want to say one of my take-homes, I was going to say this at the end of the day, but one of my take-homes from just this morning is that there are so many resources related to educational resources related to the Arctic already that exist. There's no central repository. There's no, I mean, it's a huge need of the community, right? And even as I was looking for stuff to plan a workshop, things weren't even easy to find that I knew existed, never mind what I don't know exists. So this is an aside to say, just seeing what's out there associated with different content may help us to figure out how to better organize resources that are out there too.
So, for our, Polar Learning Responding Climate Change Education Partnership Grant, we have to do an inventory in phase 1, and so Margie actually did an inventory of really cool, well-vetted, educational
awesome.
resources, and looked at the age they're targeted towards and everything, and we still are posting that on our website. So I would recommend that you take a look at that too and see if you can match it up to this different type of sorting than what she had done originally. But that's just another point as well. Is here I was referring to projects that we were already working on or that we knew of, not what the broader community was doing.
Right,
So I think we all know of other, so maybe once
Exactly.
you do the matching between what's here and what you can find elsewhere, we could all be thinking from a broader perspective.
Yes,
Yeah.
and one of the things that I mentioned to someone, I can't remember who it was earlier this morning, when this kind of hit you like a lead brick, is even if we just started a Google Doc where everyone put links to things that they know are already happening, because you're all connected to so many different arenas, right? And there's been a big investment, especially by NSF and IPY resources and whatnot. I think it would be really helpful so that we didn't have to recreate the wheel all the time.
What website is that where you're, so it's on the Polar Hub website, and maybe I'm thinking, because there wasn't the IPY one you wanted to do earlier, so maybe I could just share that with you guys and you can throw it
Yeah,
into the.
yeah, that would be
Okay.
fabulous.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Okay?
Yeah, are there any other comments? Happy to keep talking after this, but I don't want to keep up with it. Okay.
Okay?
Thank you for playing.
Okay. So we're going to have our next plenary. We welcome Oludurotimi, Adetunji from Brown University, and take it away.
All right. All right, can you all hear me? I'm a very soft spoker, so please. All right, so I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Gail, for inviting me to talk to the group. So the goal of my talk is to sort of convince you that learning science ideas could be used also for broader impact work. And so the road ahead, I'm going to talk briefly about broader impact, what that is. I know probably most of you already know what it is, but I don't want to assume. Then I will talk about learning sciences. Then after that, my goal is to give you 2 examples of projects that I've led. One almost like 7 years ago, and one that I'm currently leading. And then I'll follow up with the conclusion. So as you may know, so when you talk about the NSF Merit Review, there are 3 guiding principles, and there are also 2 review criteria. One of those review criteria is what is known as broader impact, which is how does your work actually impact society. And there is also what is known as the 5 review elements. The good news about this is that each of those review elements has to be considered while your proposal is being reviewed, either while the intellectual component or the broader impact component is being reviewed. So the question now is, when you hear the word broader impact, do you think of it as a box checking activity, or do you think of it as a burden, or is it actually as an opportunity? And my goal here is to convince you that it is an opportunity. You can actually develop programs that is publishable that you could actually use as part of your scholarship. So with that being said, so broader impact, it's basically societal benefit of research, broadly speaking. And it could come in different shapes and form, depending on your specific area of expertise. And so the other thing I would like you to know is that there is a list out there. This is from the 526 Reauthorization Act of 2010 that sort of gives examples. But you have to remember that these are just examples. It doesn't mean that you have to do any of this, or you could do some of it. But it's to give you some form of framework for the kind of potential work that you could do. So how do you develop a great broader impact plan? So these are a series of questions that I always tell people to consider. And a few years ago, actually, Gil and I were the co-chair of the group that developed the NABIC guiding principle. So if you're not familiar with this document, you might find it as a very helpful resource. So definitely check it out. So if you go through the series of questions, it allows you to think deeply about the project you're trying to propose, but more importantly, how will you assess or evaluate your broader impact? And that's my broad overview about broader impact. Now, talking about learning sciences. Learning sciences is basically an interdisciplinary field that focuses on development of effective learning methodology and solution. There are people that argue that it was the Northwestern University where this term was coined. There's some debate about that, but I put it up there because there has been a lot of talk about it was coined from them. So, but what is important here is that you think of your project having different nodes of connection, not just I am an ethics scientist, but how does your project itself connect with other domains of science? Because if you do that, the probability of your broader impact project having a huge impact is going to be great. So now I'm going to share with you the first example. So I believe this was like 7 or 8 years ago. I wrote a grant to NSF because at that time I was working at an R1 institution whereby we're having issues with enrollment issues of URM students in our geoscience unit. And so I decided to write this grant. I'm a physicist, so I went knocking at the door of one of my geoscience colleagues, and I said, you know what, I think we should try to tackle this problem. So the idea here was that we developed what is known as a project gap intervention model. So it has a series of components. So we had a series of pre-survey, presentation, hands-on activity, post-survey, and we developed a brochure. The brochure was, we did like a Google search of all URM geoscientists that we could find anywhere in America on a faculty of any institution. And I personally wrote to all of them that I'm doing this project. I want them to be involved in the project. So those that responded, we took their picture, we got a bio of how they got engaged in geoscience as a field, and we made that into a brochure that we're able to pass on to students. So, but what really caught my attention while I was designing this project was that we started thinking about a range of possibility of ideas how you could engage the students. And it was not until when we got to the fourth point here where it says, think about non-conventional methodology that is not, you know, when people think of broader impact, they always think of like K through 12 students and teachers, but can you think of other methodology? So, and that got me thinking, and the more I thought about this, remember I'm coming to this project as a sort of like a non-expert in geoscience. It's just someone with a scientific background. I was thinking more about using concept in physics to be a way to engage the student. And the more I thought about this, I decided to do something about modeling natural occurrences. So we did this exercise whereby we presented the idea of glacier dynamics to students, in addition to all certain other things that we told them. But this is quite important because now once they have the idea in their brain, they have to now come up with a way that they themselves will reproduce a glacier dynamics. So, so this is a demonstration that I gave them. The white stuff is made with something called FUBA, whereby you could actually the student can also mix it themselves. But what is more important here is that in order to really do this project, you have to understand basic math, you have to understand design, you have to understand motion, you have to understand some physics. So the combination of all of these, the students were able to come up with their own design using basic household tools, and they learn a lot. And so based on this particular hands-on activity, you could read more about it in that article that I cited. Based on this hands-on activity, I personally started thinking about other non-conventional ways to do BI work that is publishable, that is really engaging to the public. So for the project gap work, this is just one of the data in that article. As you can see in question 3, we asked the question, how might I might want to be a geoscience or art scientist? And it's a question that after they went through the series of workshop and activity, you could see some changes in their reaction. So now I'm going to turn to the fact that I started thinking deeply about other non-conventional methodology for BI work, broadly speaking. And I started thinking more about multimedia platform as a potential opportunity. Now, remember that I don't have training in multimedia platform. I'm just a physicist. I have no training. So but the idea here was that it's an experiment, right? So I took it as an experiment and as a challenge. And so I started thinking more broadly, like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I have to think it in a way whereby it has to encompass not just physics, not just chemistry, but all range of different fields. And if you really look at this idea of the thought process, similar to what the learning science group are trying to actually do. So the more I thought about this, then the next question I asked myself is, okay, what is the framework that will guide this work? And then I started thinking about, I have to know my audience. I have to know the mode of communication to this audience. Are we going to use technology to do this? And how does those audience, how do they solve problems? All of these things at that point, I really didn't have an answer. It's like a research idea. I kept asking questions. So then the more I started doing this work, so I started the work ideally in 2011, but not until 2013 that I came up with some form of framework. Then finally I got it published years later. But the idea here is that, and this is applicable to any kind of engagement work that you're trying to do, you need to know your audience. That's the very first thing. Now, if you pick any audience, you could broadly divide them into scientists and non-scientists. And you could also have an audience that I call intermediary audience. So, for example, if I'm working with a geoscientist, in that project, I'm an intermediary audience because I have some science background, even though I'm not an expert in that particular domain. So, but if you take any, so the scientists are usually what? The minority of any population. The non-scientists are usually what? The majority of any population. So it means that if we really want to engage the public, we need to fully understand how they solve problems, or how they think, or how what excites them. So based on that, the idea was that can we come up with new approaches whereby we combine the way in which scientists and non-scientists approaches problem, then use that to design BI project, or in this context of this talk. So the rest is now history. So I came up with what I call the SciToons model. The idea behind this is that it's an experimental approach whereby we use the concept of animation, high quality media, storytelling, and art to be able to develop story about scientific concept that is engaging, and then we can now use the concept of animation to publish it. So that was the idea. So for example, we did a video on climate and weather, which I would really encourage you to watch because it talks about time scale between weather and climate. So now, so the idea here is that there's what I call the SciToons creation group. So now I run a group, just like a research group, just focus on SciToons, whereby you have a group of what I call the SCG. So for every project, there are what I call novice and expert, and also expert in animation. So usually it's the student that have animation skills that serve as the expert in animation. But the idea here is that it doesn't matter what scientific field is. It could be arctic science, it could be chemistry, it doesn't matter. The framework still works because you could develop a story about that concept. You use the idea of, which I'm going to show you next. You use the SciToons design structure, and then you could produce very engaging videos. What I would like to say is that the group has attracted roughly 50% of non-science students. So that's another way of saying you're doing broader impact, because these are students that would typically might not take a science course, but they want to be part of this project. So, the SciToons design structure, we think about narration, which is extremely important. Then we do the storyboard of the narration. Then we convert it into a multimedia platform. What is very important here is that we use the concept of iterative feedback. I've had people say that a lot, but that is extremely important because for every script that we develop, it takes time. Sometimes the script goes through like 7 iteration review. We're trying to get the science correct, but we also want to get the language at the level of a broad audience. So it's a challenge. But the beauty of this is that both the expert and the novice, they learn a lot from this process because the scientists become a better communicator of the science, and the non-scientists also become they better understand what the science is. So with that in mind, I'm just going to show you some of the highlights so far. So now, we've made videos. So I'm a condensed matter physicist. So I did a video on conducting polymer. The physics of conducting polymer, for example, is the #1 video on Google search or YouTube search. So we did a video on modeling our climate many years ago. That was the 3rd video that we actually did. The video now is #1 in Google and YouTube search. It's been picked up by NOAA, AGU. AGU posted it on the AGU YouTube page. They got a permission from me. So, but the point I'm trying to make is that through this process, there have been a lot of people that have been engaged that are watching the videos. There are some of our videos whereby other people have posted on their website and they've developed curriculum based on the videos. So a good example is, so there is a video we did on echolocation that was picked up by TEDx Education, and they put it on their website, all their social media platform. Then they develop a lesson plan specific to their audience. So those are some of the ways in which the videos have been used. So here are some of the impacts. So they are highly ranked on Google or YouTube search, meaning that if someone is trying to find a particular concept, at least you're sure that they will find the right material that has been vetted. So we do survey. So there are a couple of outreach programs at Brown that uses some of our videos for actually doing outreach. So if they're covering a particular topic, they use the videos. So we've done survey on the students. So right now, there have been over 80 students that have been part of my group. Most of them have graduated, and they've gone on to great things. They are science writers. They are working in animation right now, doing scientific communication. So we do Google Analytics data, And also, as you can see, it's been listed everywhere. NIH, we partnered with NIH on a project a few years ago. Femi Lab did an article on SciToons recently. So it's just taking a life of its own. And remember, this is not my day job, but it's taking a life of its own. So here are a couple of videos that are really related to geosciences that you guys might want to, you're more than welcome to watch. I should say this though, the very first video we did was actually the video of a rock. So it seems that geoscience actually has a foundation in this world. So the idea was that I was speaking to two students about the idea, and there was a rock that was just sitting on the room. I was like, okay, let's tell the story of this rock. And that's how SciToons was started. And so we've done all those videos. The solar energy video is also highly ranked, I think number 1 or 2 on those searches right now. And here are some data. These data are like 3 years old because the data evolves over time. But I just want to give a snapshot of what the data was saying. So this shows that the age group of people, at least as of that time that were watching it, these videos actually attract a lot of female students, which is quite surprising because I was expecting, this is a collective of all the data, so it's not just geoscience related videos. Because I was expecting, because we did a lot of physical science related videos, that this will not be the case. So I was really shocked to see this data. And so specifically for the one on weather and climate, similarly, a lot of female are actually interested in watching the video compared to their male counterpart. The other thing I should say is that my group actually has about 75% of female students. I don't know why, they just kept coming. They like this approach of learning science. So we did a survey of, so there is a outreach program at Brown called Brown Science Prep, so which is focused on getting all high school students in the local community of Brown engaged in science. It's a free program, and high school students from different schools, they joined the program. So we did this, the people running the program, they used some of the SciToons videos. I can't remember the exact video, but one of them at that time, and these are some of the results that we got. It was interesting that they felt that they learned something by watching the videos. So that was really encouraging. And then we've surveyed some of the students that have gone on, that have graduated in the past, to see how did their engagement in SciToons production, how has it really impacted their life, or their view of how science, understanding of, attitude of public science understanding. And we saw some shift in their attitude because of their engagement in the program. So now I'm going to just go through some of the conclusions, then I'll open it up to questions. So the idea is that thinking of non-conventional ways for engagement is very important when we're thinking of our work as scientists or educational professional. So as you can see, we've been able to draw from learning science and focusing on non-conventional platform for the work of broader impact. Then the other thing I would like to say is that the idea of co-creation, the word co-creation itself, I didn't know anything about that word like 4 years ago. If you ask me, I have no idea what that is. And I think it's true for most scientists. I didn't know what co-creation meant, even though I was doing co-creation in my SciToons project. It was one of my colleagues in our engagement office that said, hey, there's a word for that. You've been doing this. This is great. So the idea of co-creation, whereby you think about the fact that there are knowledge from other sources. You try to listen to the audience that you're trying to reach and get their feedback into your project design. It's extremely important. And this idea of cross-disciplinary collaboration is actually an effective way to do broader impact work. The other thing is that we've been able to show that if you make science videos that are not just made only by an expert, you know, I bet you the video on conducting polymer that I cited, if I was just the one that did that, I wrote the script, probably it wouldn't have a great appeal. But because I got feedback from a lot of non-STEM students that were challenging what I was writing, this is just jargon. We don't know what you're talking about. And I kept like, okay, let's rewrite it. And that process itself, yeah, it helps to improve science communication ultimately. And the use of iterative feedback. So I think this is applicable for any kind of project that we are working on. Trying to get feedback from people, especially the audience that we're trying to reach. Getting their input is extremely important. And I think if we do that, we'll be able to have a huge impact based on our work. I think that's my presentation. I would like to acknowledge, obviously, all the support that we've received over the years in one form or the other. And more importantly, all the students that believed in this project with me over the years. And thank you. Yes.
It sounds like a really great model. Are you working mostly with undergraduates?
So historically, I started working only with undergraduate, but now I have 2 graduate students that have, actually 1 graduate and 1 postdoc that have joined the group.
My question is, this sounds like such a great thing for a college campus as a way to bring together people who maybe think they're not sciencey. Are you thinking that this would work on other college campuses? Like this is a model you could take other places, or are you thinking about expanding it in other ways?
So I think the model can work anywhere. So far you, you know, even if you don't know how to animate, for example, because that might be an hindrance in certain campus, but you could use the model to develop stories that could be publishable. You could use the model, there could be people that could just sketch. It doesn't have to be a fancy drawing, but remember that even through those sketches, we always come together and we critique the work. So if you draw something in a way that it's confusing, for example, the student will be like, okay, we still don't get it. So I think the model can work even in institutions that don't have resources to do animation, but they could still use some component of the model to get the word out. It could also be just like, I don't know if you know about Radio Lab. Yeah, so I mean, all of the videos, we have to do voiceover. And I mean, there are students that always say, oh yeah, I want to volunteer. But sometimes I will say, okay, this will not make the cut. Thank you for volunteering. We need to find some other people to do the voiceover. So if you develop materials like that, you could turn it to like a voiceover, like a podcast. You play it on your campus, and it's still going to be really powerful and engaging.
So are members of your group kind of ambassadors? Could they be ambassadors to other places?
Absolutely. So I'll give you examples. So PBS, they have STEM, it's a Science Girls, Sci Girls show. And so right now there are 2 of my former students that, they reach out to me because they want to do a show that involves animation. And I introduced them to 2 of my former students. So now those students, they are no more at Brown, they are out there in the world, but they are still passionate about this kind of work. So now they are collaborating with that show. So there are examples like that. Yeah. Yes.
In the one paper that you had up there on developing effective STEM animations,
Yeah.
does that paper talk about, like, because this is super amazing, and I'm just trying to think, like, how other universities, like she was mentioning as well, could get into something like this. Does that paper discuss, like, what software to use to make these types of animations, or?
So there was no, that particular paper doesn't have that, but there is a paper I published in 2016. We can chat later. Yeah. Yeah.
Could you put those papers on our Google Drive?
Sure. Yeah. So if you all are on social media, please follow SciToons. Yeah, that will help a lot. So because I wasn't on social media, I'm still not on social media personally, but SciToons is on social media because of a collaboration with NIH, whereby they now asked me, where is your social media handle? And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get back to you on that. So I asked my students that, okay, please just create this social media stuff for me. So that was 2 years ago. So as of 2016 January, we started, I think, the Twitter account. Then we are now on Instagram because students said that's where all the students are. So we're on Instagram. We post images of our either work that we're in progress or some of the work we've done on Instagram once a week. So you could, if you're on Instagram, you could find us there as well. Other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.